time. Someone give it a couple of seconds to start. All right, here we go. So then I need to click here. Make sure I got this set like I want. All right, cool. Thanks for being here. I want to start by being honest with you. The next 30 minutes are not going to be a feel-good assembly where we clap and go back to class unchanged. We're going to talk about bullying, about being neurodivergent, and about why this is so much bigger than what people brush off as just joking around. Let me tell you a little bit about who's standing up here. I am a certified mental health peer specialist, peer support specialist in Texas, and I am the first IED peer support specialist on Integral Care's transition support team in Austin. I am also an internationally recognized and award-winning speaker on intellectual and developmental disabilities and recovery supports. But here's the part that matters most. I live with IED, with Chun-Jansen syndrome, with sensory processing differences, and mental health challenges. So everything I am sharing today isn't theory I read about. It's the math I did in my own head growing up, and that lived experience is exactly why I do this work. The kind of bullying I'm talking about does not usually involve fistfights or obvious confrontations. It hides inside everyday social interactions that adults tend to overlook, turning the weird peer into entertainment for the group chat, making fun of somebody's voice or the way they move, using disability labels as casual insults. These things happen constantly in schools, and because people are laughing while it happens, people stop recognizing harm while they are actively creating it. That is the dangerous part. The laughter makes everyone, including staff, feel like nothing serious is happening, but for the peer being targeted, something very serious is happening. I need you to sit with this idea for a moment. When the whole room is laughing, it is almost impossible for anybody to recognize that real emotional damage is occurring. The laughter creates a shield around the behavior that makes it feel acceptable. And what schools often call just joking around can slowly convince some neurodivergent peers and peers with disabilities that they do not belong socially or sometimes even alive. Before anybody mentally checks out because that sounds dramatic, I need you to understand something clearly. This is not hypothetical. This is not something that might happen someday. This is real, and it's happening right now in schools across the US. As somebody with multiple disabilities who has survived suicide attempts, I can tell you this from experience, not from a textbook. Most people imagine suicidal thoughts appearing suddenly, like flipping a switch, but that is not usually how it works. Hopelessness usually builds slowly, quietly over months and years, especially when humiliation becomes part of somebody's daily environment. When being embarrassed at school is not a bad day, it's just another Tuesday. And the adults in the building often have no idea how deep the damage has already gone because the peer has learned to keep it hidden. I think a lot of neurotypical peers, and honestly some school district staff too, underestimate how exhausting social survival already is for many neurodivergent peers before bullying even starts. Imagine doing all of what's on the slide every single day just to get through school without being noticed for the wrong reasons. That level of constant effort takes a real toll on a person mentally and emotionally. Most people around them have no idea how much energy it takes just to exist in that space. And that is the baseline. That is before anyone has said anything cruel. That is before any bullying has even happened yet. Now add the bullying on top of that exhaustion. That level of pressure gets exhausting over time. And when you are already running on empty from just trying to survive socially, it does not take much to put somebody over the edge emotionally. That changes people, especially when it happens for years. It rewires how they think about themselves and their place in the world. And the people doing it usually have no idea how much weight their words actually carry because to them it was just a joke, just a funny moment, just something everybody laughed at. But for the person on the receiving end, it was confirmation of everything they were already afraid was true about themselves. This is what I like to call the double burden, and it's the heart of why neurodivergent peers are at so much higher risk. The first burden is just existing in a world built for neurotypical brains. There's this constant invisible labor of managing social norms, sensory overload, and communication differences that nobody else even sees you doing. The second burden is that we get specifically targeted for those very differences. The exact things that make us who we are get turned into ammunition. And when you stack those two on top of each other, you get a peer living in constant threat readiness, never able to rest, with a self image that has been shaped entirely by other people's cruelty. That combination is what pushes so many of us towards crisis, and it's almost entirely preventable. And this is where the double burden becomes so dangerous. The emotional damage usually does not come from one giant dramatic moment. Usually it comes from smaller moments stacking together over time, over and over, until somebody starts questioning their own worth. One moment becomes ammunition that follows a peer everywhere, from the classroom to the cafeteria, to the social media, to the next day at school. Everybody else moves on eventually. They forget about it by the weekend. But the peer getting targeted usually does not, because they go home replaying those moments over and over. They go home and the same questions play on a loop in their head. And these are not just passing thoughts, they become deeply held beliefs about who they are and what they deserve. Eventually, something dangerous can happen psychologically. At first, peers think these people are just being cruel. They can still separate the behavior from their identity. But after enough humiliation, after enough days of being the target, some peers start thinking, maybe they're right about me. And that shift from recognizing cruelty to internalizing it is where things become truly dangerous. That shift is when bullying becomes psychologically dangerous because repeated humiliation eventually stops sounding like other people's opinions and starts sounding like truth. And honestly, that thinking gets dark, really dark, because people do not usually wake up one random morning suddenly wanting to die. Usually, what happens is somebody spends years feeling unwanted, embarrassed, isolated, emotionally exhausted, and socially rejected. And eventually, their brain starts asking dangerous questions, not because they want to die, but because they cannot imagine things ever getting better. Those questions are the ones that scare me the most as an IED peer support specialist because by the time a peer is asking those questions, they have usually been suffering quietly for a very long time. And what scares me is that schools miss this all the time because many struggling peers become extremely good at pretending they are okay, especially neurodivergent peers who already learned early on If people see me struggling, it usually gets worse. So they mask it, they hide it, they pretend everything is fine. And the adults around them believe it because the peer has become so practiced at performing okayness. Meanwhile, everybody around them keeps laughing, keeps recording, keeps humiliating, and eventually people get so used to watching it happened that nobody realizes how serious things are becoming emotionally for the peer getting targeted. The silence protects the bullying, not the peer. And the peer learns that asking for help is more dangerous than staying quiet. That is a devastating lesson for a young person to internalize that hiding their pain is safer than revealing it. I really need peers and staff in this room to understand something. You do not fully know how close another peer or student may already be to breaking emotionally. You do not know what they are carrying internally, which means the way you treat people matters way more than you think it does. A joke that makes the whole table laugh might be the thing that convinces somebody they are fundamentally broken. You do not get to decide how your words land on somebody else. You only get to decide whether you are willing to consider the impact before you speak. And when somebody already feels unwanted long enough, that thinking can become dangerous, really dangerous, because sometimes bullying just does not just hurt peers emotionally. Sometimes it pushes people towards suicide, especially peers who are already feel isolated, different, and unwanted socially. Pretending that is not happening does not make it less real. Pretending that it is not happening does not make it less dangerous. We have to be willing to name this clearly because unclear language allows people to minimize something that should never be minimized. Now, I want to talk about something that a lot of people want to look away from, and I get it. It is uncomfortable. But looking away is part of the problem. When somebody is bullied over and over, when they are told that they are worthless, when they are excluded, mocked, humiliated day after day, that does not just hurt their feelings, it rewires how they see themselves. They can start believing the cruelty. They can start thinking maybe the world really would be better off without them. And here's the thing that makes this so dangerous. The peers who are closest to that edge are usually the ones who have stopped talking about it. They have gone quiet. They have pulled away. And everyone around them assumes they are fine because they are not causing problems anymore. So, what can you do as a peer? I want to ask you a question. Have you ever watched something happen that didn't feel right, but you weren't sure what to do? Maybe somebody was being made fun of. Maybe somebody was getting laughed at. Maybe somebody was clearly the target of a joke, but everyone around you was acting like it was funny. Most people in those moments don't join in because they're cruel. Most people stay quiet because they don't want attention turned on them. They don't want to become the next target. They don't want to make the situation awkward. So they tell themselves, it's not my business, or somebody else will do something, or my least favorite and most dangerous phrase, it's probably not that serious. But here's the problem. The person being targeted doesn't experience your silence as uncertainty. They experience it as agreement. They see 20 people laughing, 5 people watching, nobody speaking up. And the message they receive is everyone thinks this is okay. So what can you do? Sometimes the most powerful things you can do as a peer are incredibly simple. You can realize that laughing at up here in certain situations can be very hurtful and reinforce the negative self-thoughts in their mind. You can also realize that sharing the video, forwarding the screenshot, piling on in the group chat can reinforce the negative self-thoughts in the targeted peer's mind. You can also just refuse to participate. Because when enough people refuse to participate, bullying starts losing power. And sometimes the most important thing happens after the incident is over, not during it, after it. Like when you walk over and say, "Hey, I saw what happened," or "That wasn't okay," or "Just wanted to check on you." You may think that is a small moment. To somebody who feels invisible, it can be a huge moment. You are telling them, "I saw what happened," or "I don't agree with it," and or "You are not alone." And for somebody who has spent months or even years feeling unwanted, those words matter more than you can imagine. I know some people worry about being called a snitch, but if someone is being harmed, protecting them is more important than protecting someone's reputation for being funny. There is a big difference between getting somebody in trouble and getting somebody help. And before we move on, I want you to remember this. Most students will never save a life by performing CPR. But some of you may save a life simply by refusing to laugh, choosing to include someone, or speaking up when everyone else stays silent. You may never know the impact you had. You may never know what somebody was carrying. You may never know how close they were to giving up. But your decision to act might become the moment that convinced them they mattered. And sometimes that is enough to change the direction of a person's life. This one's for the adults in the room, the teachers, the counselors, the staff. I need you to hear this. Building trust with students can't start when there's already a crisis. It has to happen before that. And I know, "Are you okay?" feels like you're checking in, but honestly, most students hear that as a formality. Try something specific. "I noticed you've been quieter this week," or "You seem different lately, and I wanted you to know I see that." That tells a student you are actually paying attention, not just going through the motions. And please take the just joking stuff as seriously as you take a shove in the hallway, because to the student on the receiving end, the damage is the same. Okay, so this is the most personal part of my talk, and I need you to really hear me. I was the neurodivergent peer. I was bullied. My brain started asking dangerous questions, and those questions turned into what felt like logical conclusions. I have survived suicide attempts. I am telling you this not because I want your pity. I'm telling you because I'm standing here. I built a career and found my purpose. The worst moment of my life was not the last moment of my life. And whether you're the one hurting right now, or you know someone who is, or maybe you've been the person making it harder for someone else, I need you to know the worst moment doesn't have to be the end. I want to say this directly to anyone in this room who may be struggling right now. If you are hurting right now, or if you have ever found yourself thinking that the world would somehow be a better place without you in it, please hear me. That is not the truth, even when it feels true. Those thoughts are a sign that you are carrying more than anyone should have to carry alone. And they are a signal to reach out, not pull away. You do not have to figure this out by yourself. And you do not have to wait until things feel bad enough to say something. Please reach out to a trusted adult, a teacher, a school counselor, a coach, or any staff member you feel safe with. You can keep it simple. You can just say, I am not okay and I need to talk. That one sentence is enough to start getting help. Finally, I want you to walk out of here knowing this. You are worthy of getting the support you need. You are worthy of help, worthy of care, and worthy of a future. Reaching out for help is one of the bravest, strongest things as a person you can do for yourself or for a peer. Thank you. Or nope, that's screen share and then stop recording. Give me a second.